All right. So today's Torah portion, this week's Torah portion is Naso. We have one more week. We'll meet again next Wednesday, and then that will be it until September. And we'll pick up again after Labor Day. So we'll just have the summer off for Torah study and say the bracha. Just 1 second, let one person in. There we go. So like I said, the Torah portion is Naso, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. If you have the Eitz Chaim, we're on page 791. Whatever other edition of Chumash you have, it's the book of Numbers, chapter 4, beginning with verse 21. The note on the bottom of the page points out that this is the longest of all the portions in the entire Torah. So I remember last year that we talked about one of the topics mentioned in this portion. First, the portion begins by continuing to describe the Levitical families and their responsibilities vis-a-vis the Mishkan, the portable sanctuary. Then it goes on to describe some essential sacrifices that one would have to make if one swore falsely, and then it describes the Nazarite oath one could take upon him or herself for a minimum of 30 days, but there's no maximum, of being a Nazarite. So taking on a couple of restrictions in one's life, that is to refrain from any consumption of any grape products and refraining from cutting one's hair. Those two things would set one apart from the rest of the community and would provide an opportunity for extra spirituality. So there's a description here of the Nazarite, which is followed by which we are going to look at momentarily, the priestly blessing. And then also there's what I skipped over is also in case a husband suspects his wife of being unfaithful, the husband can force his wife to undergo a ceremony in the Mishkan and later in the Temple in Jerusalem to prove her faithfulness, to prove her husband was wrong. That's called the sota. So these, and then the portion concludes with the 12 days in which each of the 12 tribes brought a sacrifice or offerings to dedicate the Mishkan, to dedicate the sanctuary. So that chapter 7, makes it the longest chapter, I think, in the entire Torah, because of all those 12 tribes' offerings. So what I wanted to look at, like I said, is the priestly blessing. So let's turn to page 804 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 6, verse 22. So it's the end of the fourth Aliyah, if that helps you find it if you don't have the Eitz Chaim. Look for the end of the fourth Aliyah. Look for the end of the sixth chapter. Again, beginning with verse 22. So it'll be familiar. We know the priestly blessing. One of the verses is on top of the sanctuary, on the eastern wall of the sanctuary, under the window. I just want to see if I have a picture of that on my virtual background. Yes, I do. And let's see if I can know. I can't because of my background. I don't have a green screen, so I can't share you the picture of it. But you know the letters that are above on the wall that's above the bima under the half moon window. So that's the second verse of the 3 verses of the priestly blessing. So, Vayidaber Adonai el Moshe lemor. God spoke to Moses saying, Daber el Aharon ve'el banav lemor. Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Ko tivarachu et bnei Yisrael amor lahem. This is how you should bless the children of Israel. Say to them. And this is the blessing. Yevarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. So I'm going to translate it literally, which will be a little bit different from the English translation here in the Eitz Chaim. Yevarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. God should bless you and keep you, or guard you. God should bless you and guard you. Okay, so also this is written in the singular. The priests are supposed to recite this blessing every day for the entire community of Israel, and they're speaking in the singular. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha vichuneka. So I'm going to translate this literally. God should shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. The English translation here has nothing to do with the literal meaning of the words. I guess the English translation wanted to get away from the anthropomorphism, that the idea that God would have a face and that God's face could shine on people. I translate it usually, may God shine God's light upon you and be gracious to you. Okay, so that's the verse that's under the window. Because light shines through the window, I thought that would be an appropriate verse to have on the wall that everybody would look at. So may God's countenance shine upon you and be gracious to you. That could be an older translation of this, but certainly God is shining light on the people of Israel, as opposed to this translation, the Lord deal kindly and graciously with you. Okay, I think that loses something from the very, we want a very personal connection to God from this verse, that may God's light shine upon you, okay? Which also is related to this blessing. Well, let me finish the blessing first, and then I'll get into the logistics and the choreography. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God's countenance be lifted upon you, or be raised upon you. All right, it's the same word, panav, or meaning his face. May God's face be lifted upon you and grant you peace. Okay, v'yasem lecha, lasim means to put, but to put you peace doesn't make sense in English. So grant you peace is a better translation. Okay, and then one more verse, V'samu et shemi al bnei Yisrael, they shall put my name on the people of Israel. Right, the translation here, thus they shall link my name with the people of Israel. No, I like the literal better. They should place my name on the people of Israel. That's a literal kind of physical thing they're doing with God's name. Va'ani avarachem, and I will bless them. Bless the priests, bless the people. I don't know. I think it's bless the people, and the priests are the vehicle for God's blessing. Instead of God blessing the people directly, God is asking the priests to invoke God's name and God's countenance and God's presence, and thus bless the people of Israel. So God is using the priests as a tool by which to bless the people. Now, a little bit of the choreography here that reflects upon God's countenance shining on the people. So when the Kohanim bless the congregation, outside of Israel, this happens only on the holidays. So we just did this in Shul on Sunday and Monday, on the 2 days of Shavuot. So it's done on Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, and also the high holidays on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. We only do it in our congregation, and I think it's a lot of congregations add this, that if the holiday falls on Shabbat, we don't do it on Shabbat. So we only do it on the weekday festival days. So Shavuot was Sunday and Monday, so we did it both days, but 2 of the days of Passover were on Shabbat, so we didn't do the Duchanin on those Shabbat days. So if Rosh Hashanah is on a Shabbat, Yom Kippur is on a Shabbat, we don't do Duchanin. Otherwise, that's what it's called in Yiddish, Duchanin, from the word Duchan, which means platform, another word for bima. So the Kohanim come up to the bima on the Duchan, on the platform, and they do Duchanin. That's where the term came from. So Kohanim, the way the Kohanim do this today is harking back to how the Kohanim would work in the temple in Jerusalem, and before that in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary in the desert. So the Kohanim would immerse themselves in the mikveh to ensure that they were pure. And after that, they would also wash their hands. So, and the Leviim, the Levites, would help them in that process. So Kohanim and Leviim today participate in this by the Leviim washing the hands of the Kohanim. And then when the Kohanim come into the sanctuary, they take off their shoes before going onto the bima. Also, so this is, we associate that with entering a mosque, right? So going into a mosque, you have to take off your shoes as a sign of holiness. God asked Moses to take off his shoes before approaching the burning bush. So there's this sense of not having shoes on your feet because you have outside filth coming into the holy precinct. So by taking off your shoes, you're leaving the filth outside, and you are in a more pure state, being able to walk onto the bima that way. So the Kohanim take off their shoes before coming onto the bima. Then Kohanim also traditionally have a big talit, and when they're about to recite this blessing, they have the talit over their faces, because may God's light shine upon you and be gracious to you is reflected in the faces of the Kohanim, that there's a sense that perhaps this light of God is shining directly through the faces of the Kohanim. And by them having the talit over their faces, they're protecting the congregation from God's light. And an extra protection is for the congregation when they are listening to the Kohanim recite the blessing. They're supposed to avert their attention from the Kohen. You're not supposed to look directly at the Kohen as they are reciting this blessing. Okay? And then under the talit, the Kohen is supposed to have their hands situated like this, right? So not everybody can do this. I'm not a Kohen, but this is what the Kohen is supposed to do. So Leonard Nimoy, playing Spock on Star Trek, did this. Apparently he was a Kohen and knew about this. So when the director was looking for some Vulcan symbol, Leonard Nimoy said, "Oh, what about this?" That's the legend of Spock and Star Trek. So anyway, this looks, if you use your imagination just a little bit, is each hand is the letter shin. When you split your fingers like this, you have 3 prongs here, 1, to 3, right? So 3 prongs for the letter Shin. So you have it twice. The letter Shin represents Shaddai, one of the more ancient names of God. So by having their hands like this with their talit over their face, this is the way that the Kohanim are invoking God as they are reciting the blessing. Okay? So that's the logistics of how the Kohanim do this. So there, before we look at the commentary below the line, there are some who suggest within the non-Orthodox world that we shouldn't be duchenin anymore, that it harks back to temple worship, and in modern times we really don't want to recall temple worship because it might mean that we're looking forward to the restoration of temple worship. Also, another part of this is that it maintains hierarchy in the Jewish community, that by having the Kohanim Duchen reciting the prayer on behalf of the congregation, we are maintaining then this sense that the Kohanim are so-called better than the rest of the community because they have the opportunity to do this and nobody else does, right? So why should the power to bless be maintained only in one segment of the community? Why can't everybody have the power to bless? So when we were in the process, we, being our congregation, was in the process of becoming egalitarian, the question arose, should we be fully egalitarian or just gender egalitarian? Okay, so when I became the rabbi 28 years ago, the first thing that was on the agenda was making sure that we became gender equal in the congregation. So when we became egalitarian, that usually means men and women able to do the exact same thing. So that quickly passed easily, and the Constitution was rewritten and voted overwhelmingly by the congregation to reflect the fact that we are gender egalitarian. But I pushed the envelope a little bit and said, do we want to do away with Cohen and Levi as well to be fully egalitarian? And so there's a big town hall meeting to discuss that. And it was clear in that town hall meeting that no, we should still maintain Cohen and Levi for the community. So I have no problem with it, and I actually like duchenin when it's done. There are a couple of people every now and then who walk out when duchenin happens in our congregation. I like the history. I like the connection it has with, it's kind of reliving history as we are doing it. And it's a mitzvah for the Kohanim to do this, right? That in the prayer book, right before they recite this prayer, there's a blessing that they recite that reflects that it's a mitzvah for them to do it. So let me just, here it is. The blessing is Baruch Atah. So the standard formula, Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav. No, actually, it's not that. It's a special formula. Asher Kitshanu, who has sanctified us. So the Kohanim are reciting this specific blessing. Asher Kitshanu b'kedushato shel Aaron, who has sanctified us with the sanctity of Aaron, vetzivanu, and commanded us, levarech et amo Yisrael be'ahava, to bless his people Israel with love. So it's not the standard Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav etzivanu. It's a unique formula just for the Kohanim. So this is one of the 613 commandments. So if you're not a Kohen, it's impossible to observe, to do all 613 commandments. Only a Kohen can do all 613 because this one is only one that the Kohen can do. So why should I deny a Kohen an opportunity to fulfill a mitzvah. So I think it's powerful that we maintain that possibility for the Kohen. And there's no sense that the Kohen is any better than anybody else. We're all equal. It's just this is an opportunity that a Kohen has that a non-Kohen doesn't have. And it's not because they're better or not. It's just this is the way the system was set up. Yes, Jules.
Is it customary to have your children under the tallis when this is going on?
Yeah, there are different customs about this. And I always say that if you have your children with you, well, we're all supposed to be standing while the duchenin is happening. And if we have our children with us, it's customary to have them wrapped next to us under our talit, kind of because the priestly blessing isn't just recited by the Kohanim every day; it's recited by parents for their children every Friday night at the Shabbos dinner table. So it has become, without the temple in Jerusalem, one of the things we miss, the rabbi said, was this recitation of the prayer. So why don't we transition and allow parents to recite this prayer for their children every Friday night at the Shabbos dinner table? So I don't know how far back actually that tradition goes. Does it go back to the time of the rabbis? I'm not sure. I can look that up another time, but that's a way to keep the blessing alive. And to show from the rabbi's perspective that we all have the power to bless and that we all have the ability to invoke God's name, to ask God to impart blessing on other people. So when we bless our children every Friday night, this is something we can do. We also invoke this blessing. I'm not sure if it's done in the Orthodox world, but rabbis bless the B'nai Mitzvah children with this blessing after speaking to the student at some point in the Shabbat morning service. It's done at wedding ceremonies. I usually do it at the Bedekin or the ketubah signing. After the ketubah is signed, I have the parents of the bride and groom recite the blessing for their children before we go on to the ceremony itself. So yes, the blessing is incorporated in many ways. And in those days when rabbis would recite a closing prayer, often this is one that would be recited by the rabbi, is a part of the morning blessings. So in some prayer books, and before the morning service technically begins out loud in the synagogue, there's a preliminary silent portion, a couple pages to recite before the service begins. And one of those sections is a section of Torah study. So we say the prayer for La'asok b'divrei Torah, like I recite before starting this class. And then this section is chosen as a section of Torah to study because it's a unit all to itself. It's 3 short sentences, and yes, it's found in the daily prayer book that way too. So it's a common prayer, it's a popular prayer, and if we're familiar with Hebrew, the more familiar with Hebrew we are, we have a sense of the poetry of this prayer because it's 3 words, then 5 words, then 7 words, and that's intentional. How it was written. It's kind of like haiku in a way. It fills a particular kind of metric, kind of poetic way to write a prayer. So 3 words, 5 words, 7 words. And it's possible that it's 7. I don't, how many letters is it? There's something about how many letters are in the prayer too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 7, 8, 9, 30, 31, 32, 34, 5, 36, 36, 7, 8, 9, 40 for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 50 for the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 60 letters. There's 60 letters in the prayer too. 60 is, it's not the same as 70, but there's something about that there's 60 letters in the prayer too. So I just offhand just remember there's an Italian rabbinic commentator known as Cassuto, who was known for looking at patterns, numeric patterns of the ages of people in the Torah. So Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob's ages are related to the number 7 in some way. And also he has a comment about the 3 words, 5 words, 7 words, and the 60 letters in it, there's some significance to that too. So if you're into numerology, then look up Cassuto commentary, priestly blessing. If you Google that, I'm sure you'll find what he has to say about this. So let's look now below the line, see what our commentary says about this blessing. And it begins actually on 803 below the line. Okay, just how the book was edited to make room for this. These 6 verses contain perhaps the most familiar words in the book of Numbers. In many traditional synagogues, descendants of the Kohanim pronounce these words on festivals as a blessing of the congregation. In their capacity as modern equivalents of Kohanim, rabbis and cantors commonly invoke it for a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, for a bride and groom, or as the closing benediction of a service. Parents use it to bless their children on Shabbat Eve. Okay, everything I've said. Do human beings have the power to bless, bottom of 804, other human beings? Ishmael teaches in the Talmud that the priests do indeed bless the people. And as a reward, God blesses the priests, taking the object, and I will bless them in verse 27 to be the priest. So there's one rabbi who actually does think that the Kohanim do have the power to bless. Now, this is kind of like the Christian idea, or the Catholic, more specifically, the Catholic idea of the priest, right? The priest does have some inherent power to bless or to also absolve one of sin, right? So it's a power granted to the priest through their call to the priesthood and their study in the seminary and their ordination. So there is no power granted to me as a rabbi to do anything like that. Yes, I was ordained to be a rabbi, and yes, my father was ordained to be a rabbi, but we are no different than any of you. In fact, we don't have the right to duchen because we're not Kohanim. So the Kohanim have that right that we don't have, even though we're rabbis. The only thing that makes us different than you is that we went to rabbinical school. But any of you could go to rabbinical school if you so choose. If you have the desire to do that, requisite background in Hebrew, etc., and can withstand the academic rigor, then yes, anybody can become a rabbi. Did the Chabad Rebbe bless people? He did, but and people felt that he had the power to bless them. So I can't speak for Hasidic rabbis. But Hasidic communities do believe that their Rebbe has the power to bless them. Right? So we were talking before the class started about the wedding, my nephew's wedding in Israel. My nephew met his wife at the Kabbalah Center in Manhattan. So I don't know anything about the Kabbalah Center, but it's just another way to be involved Jewishly in the Jewish community, and their style of prayer is a little bit different than regular Ashkenazi style of prayer. They tend to use the Sephardic Nusach, the Sephardi prayer book, but, and even within that, some of the prayers are a little bit different. On Friday night, they have a section of the service dedicated to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. And Shimon Bar Yochai, traditionally of the time of the rabbis of the Mishnah, so about 1800 years ago, 1900 years ago, supposedly was the rabbi who founded Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism and wrote the classic text, the Zohar. So in Kabbalah-centered Judaism, they have a prayer focusing on Shimon Bar Yochai. So I'm a little bit put off by this, and also I would be put off within the Hasidic community, investing all this power and authority in the Rebbe. It's just not normative Judaism to do that. It's not. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just not my style of Judaism, and I'm not interested in sitting at a Rebbe's tish, eating the Rebbe's leftover, thinking that that is going to bless me, or waiting in line as people did at 770 Eastern Parkway in Crown Heights, Brooklyn, to get $1 from the Rebbe and thus be blessed by the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Okay, for some people, it's important to do that. Some people, go to the graves of rabbis in order to be blessed, like the Bratslaver Hasidim often go, well, now it's dangerous to do so. I'm not sure when it's going to be safe to do that again, to the Rabbi Nachman of Bratslav's grave in Uman, Ukraine, and do high holiday services there. Okay, gesundheit. If that's what they want to do and they feel spiritual in that process, fine. I'm just saying that for me and for normative Judaism, we don't feel as if one place, one person has the power to do that. So this kind of is a slippery slope, this prayer of the Kohanim, because we have to be very clear that the Cohen does not have the power to bless. It's just their mitzvah to do so, to invoke God's name so that God is blessing the community. That's what it is. So it's a prayer similar to the prayer that we all recite when we pray 3 times a day. It's just this is another vehicle in order to receive God's blessing. Okay, so Rabbi Yishmael thought that the Kohanim actually had the power to do so, but then we go on. So on the 5th line and below the line, the Tanhuma suggests that when the priests aspire to bless the people, God endorses their efforts and join in making their blessing authentic. So Tanhuma is one collection of rabbinic midrash, and the rabbis here are saying, no, it's once the Kohanim start speaking, then God gets involved and God blesses. Rashbam, who's a generation after Rashi, however, interprets the verse to mean that when the priests invoke God's blessing, they shall link my name with the people, God responds by blessing the people Israel. The blessing is structured in 3 lines, each slightly longer than the preceding one. In Hebrew, 3 words and 5 words and 7 words, with the divine name occurring as the 2nd word in each line. Right? So it's the holiest name of God that is invoked in this prayer, and 2nd word of each line. Okay, so I unfortunately don't have the time to do the full hour of our class today because I have a meeting to get to at noon. So we'll stop here for today. I encourage you to read the rest of the commentary here about this. And like I said, we will meet again next Wednesday. So that'll be our last Torah study for this academic year, and we'll meet up again the first Wednesday after Labor Day. So have a good rest of the day, everybody. Take care. Stay healthy.
Thank you.